Next from Chicago, Illinois Chief Justice Thomas Kilbride delivers an address on the decline in funding for the Illinois Judiciary. Justice Kilbride talks about the devastating cuts in services that are taking place and of further cuts that will follow if the legislature does not increase funding for the Illinois court system. This runs about 20 minutes.
Good morning. I wanted to start with two introductory comments. And one is, I heard the tail end of the earlier presentation, social media, Facebook, and for what it's worth, when I heard my colleague talk about where's Justice Tice, that she was trying to see these photographs of her grandchildren on Facebook. She says, how do I get there when I'm told as a judge I can't have a Facebook page? In my 2010 retention campaign, I had a fierce internal struggle with my non-lawyer campaign managers and consultants who wanted me to have a Facebook page. So I lost a lot of sleep over that one, but thought maybe you'd find that funny, but that's okay. Well, listen, the other thing I wanted to say is Justice Wexton made reference to the lawyer legislators who were here, and many of you know House Representative Jack Franks, the son of our former outstanding, among many outstanding presidents of the Illinois State Bar Association, Herb Franks. And Jack has been promoting the idea that for the lawyer legislators, today is a classic example of bribery. That if you come here, you get your 1.5 hours. You didn't find that funny either. 1.5 hours of MCLE credit, and you would still want money from the legislature. So now, the other day, he says, well, maybe if you give us 3 hours of credit, we'll do something. This morning, he wanted 30 hours of credit. I know this is televised, so for the record, I was just joking. But I want to thank Judge Rita Novak, President of the Illinois Judges Association, for the invitation to be here, and John Thies, the President. Yeah, you are in the room. Very good. And I want to also acknowledge Justice Wexton and Judge Patty Golden for their work on the Committee for Fair and Impartial Courts. And I do look forward to hearing from the panel. I want to have a little bit of fun here, if I may, at the expense of some of the panel members. Mary McQueen from the National Center of State Courts, I told her I was going to refer to her as one of the troublemakers from Virginia. And Laura Bellows, we're so delighted and happy that you're here, and what was said last night at the dinner and what was said earlier today, that you're one of our own, and we truly mean that, and we're very proud that a lawyer from Illinois is the president of the ABA.
Thank you, Judge. But you could also tell me that I'm one of the troublemakers from Illinois.
And Mike Tardy, our director, he's, as I've said before publicly, I've gotten to know him extremely well since he took over the directorship of the AOIC, and he's not a troublemaker. His job is trying to resolve trouble and problems, and he's just a wonderful guy, and we're very fortunate to have him. Ruth Ann Schmidt, I've known for several years, and she's the director of the Lawyers Trust Fund. And Herb Franks, who's the president of the board of the Lawyers Trust Fund, was reminding us that we have to get the word out that Ruth Ann started as the director when she was a teenager, because she's coming up on 30 years as the director, and we have to honor her. She's done a tremendous job, and we thank you for what you've done, Ruth Ann. And last but not least, but I don't have much to say about Jack Coutron because I just met him yesterday for the first time. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say as well. And I thought maybe at that I'd just sit down and shut up. But I do have a few comments I want to share with you all. And on court funding specifically, I've been, and I say this at risk, and I'm going to make a little joke here or there about the legislature, but I hold it in high regard. I have many who are close friends of mine that have been very helpful to me in the past and in the future, I hope. But I've been to the legislature twice as the Chief Justice to give a formal budget presentation on behalf of the court. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do the third time because it hasn't made any difference the first time versus the second time. And in fact, we lost money the second time, so maybe I'm not the guy to show up to give the presentation. But I've been on the floor of the House twice now. Well, not the House and the Senate, which was very interesting and lively, and I found entertaining at moments, but informative. and I enjoy doing that to meet and talk to the legislators. But I have to tell you, recently, and I'm looking at a few of the legislators from the House, I don't believe they were at it, but it was described to me, 2 weeks ago Wednesday, I was invited by the House leadership down to meet with the so-called tribunal. That's the name informally that I was told, whether or not that's the formal name, of the House appropriation chairs, majority folks, minority individuals, and it was early in the morning. I went in to talk, and Fred Crespo, state rep, who's the chair of our one House Appropriation Committee that the court goes in front of, finally got the folks to settle down and listen. So I started to talk, and I only had one sheet of paper, and I didn't have a written speech. It was just an outline. And about 3/4 of the way, I was virtually done with my comments. Now, this was the day of the big $550 million draw on the, whatever that was, the Powerball, the lottery. And this one gentleman who's a state rep, I won't name him, and maybe this is a comment on my abilities. He raises his hand, he says, "Now wait a minute, what are you here for, and what do you want?" And I wanted to say, hey, I just told everybody how to win the Powerball tonight. But, so maybe I'm not the guy to deliver the message, but I've told that that's common with this individual. But what I want to talk about more seriously is the, and I do want to make reference to the ABA and Laura Bellows and her colleagues, and I don't know exactly who wrote this, but I do want to make reference to the theme that the ABA has promoted in the not too distant past and continuing to some degree, the phrase about no courts, no justice, no freedom. And this was a line, and it's just one sentence that I want to quote, that really, really hits it on the nail. "The most eloquent Constitution is worthless with no one to enforce it," close quote. The most eloquent Constitution is worthless with no one to enforce it. And that's what we're talking about. The court system has to be fully funded, has to be fully staffed, fully supported to have a Constitution that means anything. And for those of you who joined us back on October 24th for the first annual Access to Justice Conference, Justice Dickinson, the presiding justice of Mississippi, talked and gave a very inspirational presentation. And he quoted the Constitution from Russia, the Constitution from China, other constitutions, and you would think that language was lifted from our own United States Constitution. The point is, our Constitution is only as good as those lawyers and judges who are here and able to enforce it. And what I want to explain briefly is that our court system, the funding, is fundamental to the rule of law in Illinois. And business interests, in particular, it's important to them. And I'm not sure that we've fully, well, I think they understand it, but I don't know that we've partnered up as well as we probably should. But economic stability in the country and in the state of Illinois is dependent upon the courts, because our courts are the way that we resolve disputes in the state of Illinois, contractual, property, and other marketplace disputes. And for those of you who had the chance to read President John Thies's column that was in the November edition, he quoted a World Bank study that said, and I want to quote, "An economy with an efficient judicial system, clear property rights, and an effective government will produce higher total wealth." I tried, and again, the legislators, when I talked to you about my 1/3 theory, and as a lawyer, I did learn something about 1/3. I know how to divide an attorney's fee. It's 33 1/3%. Beyond that, I'm married to a math teacher. I'm not very good at mathematics. In fact, I'm pretty bad at it. But I shared with the legislature my view, and they did laugh at this. I said, you know, we're three separate branches of government: executive, legislative, judicial. We should all get 1/3 of the budget. Well, the legislators laughed even more heartily than that. And I said, I tell you what, you give us the 33 1/3, I will give you back 30%. And we'll keep 3 1/3 and we'll be rolling in the dough. The Illinois budget, the entire Illinois budget for this fiscal year that we're in right now, both what they call the general, GRF, general revenue funds, and the non-general revenue funds, that's the fee stuff. For example, Secretary of State registration fees, license fees, that kind of thing. When you add that all up, in the state of Illinois right now, the budget is $57 billion, $410 million, and 45,000. The Illinois court budget this fiscal year is $281 million, not billion, $281 million, $87,100. That is less than what we received, $6 million less than what we received last year. That amounts to less than 1/2% of the entire budget in the state of Illinois. The point and the reason I bring that up is there's really not what I would say a fair proportion or distribution. And I'm not saying we're entitled to a third, but the point is, when they make cuts, and I say this respectfully to my lawyer legislator colleagues who are here, you can make a rounding error in your budget. We could be fully funded, and it wouldn't make a hill of beans of difference to the economy in the state of Illinois and the fiscal budget of the state. Our budget, 54% of it goes to salaries of judges, and because of constitutional case laws, it made it clear that that can't be cut into. The legislature knows that. But what results when they make cuts is the rest of the budget, and there's two other components: probation, that constitutes 28% of our budget, and operations, paying rent, buildings, paying utility bills, phone bills, etc., paying for copiers, printers, computers, etc. That's 18%. But we have been hit year after year for a good decade plus. And as Mary McQueen knows this, one of the Chief Justices from one of the states, I can't remember, used the line, and so I didn't come up with this, but they've trimmed the branches. This gets confusing when you talk about the analogy of branches of government. Trim the branches year after year. We don't really have any branches on our tree as the court system left. Now they're cutting into what's really the trunk, the main part of the tree. And the last 10, 11 years in probation alone, it was at the last time I testified before the House and the Senate, we were $20 million down from where we were in 2002. Now this past year, with the $8 million cut, and what was really more than $20 million, I now find out because I didn't do the actual calculations, we're closing in on $30 million less than we had in 2002. Now think about that, 2002 following 9/11. And we remember, and we've had economic troubles in this country since 9/11. The economy was really in the toilet after the 9/11 incident. But yet, in 2002, we had 20 million more. And the hits that we've received on probation really are digging deep. We had a meeting, and Mike Tardy was there the other day, on 12/12/12, December 12, 2012, the first meeting of the statewide Illinois Probation Advisory Committee for the Illinois Supreme Court. These are folks that run probation departments all around the state of Illinois. I'm trying to remember the number, 13, 15? And we need to check this story out, but I'm going to share it even though it's being televised, because I do know it's a problem, but I want to verify this before I pick up the phone and try and talk to Judy Bart-Topinka about it. And as the legislators know, and many of you may know, I don't believe there's a statutory system of how they prioritize payments, but we all know the state of Illinois is not a quick pay. We've had offices that have been threatened with shutdowns, evictions, because we haven't had rent paid, utility shutoffs and so forth. But what's really critical is that we were told by one of the probation officers, titles, I'm not sure what his title is, but I'm not going to name who it was, but he had to get on the phone to beg with the comptroller's office to issue, the vouchers were sent from our office to the comptroller, and then they issued the paychecks to the employees, who are really state employees, but they're not treated like state employees, like somebody who's working at a state facility, so that they got their paycheck for their family. We're not talking about big paychecks. So he was on the phone begging to get the paychecks so that families get paid. And it's really a crime, I think, to be so bold to say that, to not pay folks who are already struggling with a reduced budget, with higher demand than they have in the past, and yet they can't get paid on a timely basis. And we don't know the extent of that, but we are going to find out about it and make our case. But the consequences of the cutback on probation, and I'm not touching the civil side of this, because the court really doesn't fund civil. I know that Ruth Ann Schmidt's going to talk about that, and that really dovetails with what the court has decided to do in access to justice, but that's another story, at least for me, for another day. But here are the consequences. With less money, just as you know in any family budget, you do less with less money. So you have to make your own internal cuts. And what happens in the probation field is that many of the costs now get shifted to the counties. Counties are picking up more and more of the cost. Prison costs are going up. Police services are going up and demanded upon, and the impact on the community is really immeasurable because low risk and moderate risk defendants are getting less probation monitoring. They all need probation monitoring, and the high risk get it, but because of the lack of resources, as you go down the totem pole, there's less and less. We asked for 19% more, and I guess maybe that's one of the reasons the legislature was laughing and looking at me like I was crazy. Not really. I mean, I had a very respectful, good budget hearing. But that was only at 90% of what the legislature has mandated that we do. And I say this with all due respect, one of the legislators, whom I don't recall who it was at the moment, and I wouldn't name the individual's name, but said, well, you know, we have all kinds of mandates in the state that we don't fund. I said, well, you know, when we as judges and lawyers, we take an oath of office to be a lawyer, to be a judge, and then our oath says we're going to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Illinois, and that we're going to faithfully discharge the duties of our office. And that means to uphold the laws in the state of Illinois. To me, it's a constitutional obligation as a judge and as a lawyer to do what is on the books that is clear, that's mandated. We are now working today with 500 less workers than we had in 2002, and that's just in the state of Illinois, 500 less workers. And you think, well, that's not very many. Well, there's not very many probation officers in the state. And Justice Wexton mentioned the survey they did with the chief judges, and I just wanted to share two statistical facts that with 100% of the chief judges responding, I almost said chief justices. My mother did that the other day. I said, Mom, there's only one chief justice in the state of Illinois. But even I mess it up. She didn't think that was funny that I was correcting her. But anyway, on the question of how do you rank the availability of probation services, of all the chief judges in the state of Illinois, 65% responded, it's not adequate. On the question about whether or not probation is a critical need for additional resources, 85% said it's critical. 85%. And I dare say those chief judges were underselling, because who wants to stand in front of a community or wherever and say, well, we don't have adequate resources to do what we have to do to protect the community? They're not going to say that. So I'm sure those numbers are somewhat skewed. But I want to give you just one example, and I'm going to close up here really briefly and quickly. It might sound crazy, but to spend more money, and I made this pitch before the budget appropriation folks, to spend more money on probation would save more money. And here's why. In October of 2011, we had 4,964 Class 4 felons who were nonviolent felons on drug possession charges. Not distributors, not people who were robbing banks or robbing whatever. You know, the point is they were nonviolent, they got caught, and they ended up, because of their record or whatever, they ended up in prison. Maybe they got in prison because they didn't have a proper pre-sentencing investigation report. That's a consequence of these reduced budgets. On average, it costs $3,423, $243, well, whatever the number is, right? To monitor one of these individuals. If you put them in DOC, you're spending more than $22,000 a year. Now you start multiplying that times 1,000 felons or 2,000 or 3,000, you're saving millions of dollars, $22 million on the short end of it. That's a lot of money, but it wouldn't cost that much to save that much. And I think instead of making cuts for the sake of cuts, wherever you are, if it's a business, if you're operating a law office, you're going to make cuts in your operation that make sense. So you're going to spend money that makes sense to make more money. Same thing is true in the legislative budget. And I say this with all due respect, but I just don't believe that as a body, and I'm not talking about individuals here in this room, because the fact that you're a lawyer legislator here means you care about this issue, or maybe you're worried about getting your MCLE hours too. But no, I mean seriously, respectfully, that I don't think that as an institution the legislature appreciates that the courts is in fact a one-third separate and co-equal branch of our form of government. It's the courts, it's not the legislature, it's the courts, not local county governments, and it's the courts and not the executive, it's not the governor, not any of the agencies that are permitted to constitutionally sentence defendants. What probation does is in effect a judicial function, preparing pre-sentence investigation reports, monitoring to make sure that judicial sentences are carried out and complied with. That is a judicial function. It doesn't belong to any other branch of government. And this movement to try and incentivize, I don't know if that's the proper pronunciation of that verb, but to try and get counties to reduce, to somehow get involved to reduce sentences just doesn't make sense. It may make sense in the way that we might share the same idea, but it just doesn't make constitutional sense. So I just want to close with this one final statement to say that we need to do what we need to do, and I don't know what that is, okay, other than get us more money for probation. And I'm not talking about money for judges, I'm not talking about money for anything else, but to pay probation to protect and preserve the rule of law in the state of Illinois. And I want to thank you for your attendance here today and your attention, and you're a great audience. I said hello to a lot of folks, and I hope to say hello to more of you later on today. And thank you very much.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.